Okay, sweet. I mean, we can start now, and as people come in, they can just join in because the beginning is fairly introductory anyways. I'd love to know any of you who have joined the previous sessions. I think, I don't know, maybe Peggy. I feel like I saw you for one of the previous weeks, but yeah, just comment below if you've come before or if this is your first time, because I've done this type of workshop twice before. And, oh, hi. Yeah, for those that just joined, hi Mal, hi Peggy. Yeah, so for some of you, a little bit of this might be a little bit of a repeat, just the beginning portion at least, if you joined before for one of the earlier few workshops, but if you haven't, thank you and welcome. Super excited to chat with everyone. Can everyone see my screen okay? Are my slides being shared? You can just comment in the chat, just so I know. Okay, if people can't see it, let me know. But yeah, thank you so much for joining today. I'm excited to share this space with you and take some time to chat about accessibility and disability. For the previous two workshops in this series, I chatted a little bit more about accessibility tools and resources and why it's important to be, inclusive in your content. Today, we'll actually chat a little bit more about some specific features and tools in Microsoft 365. So that's more things like PowerPoint, Word, Excel. A lot of you might use this in your day-to-day life anyways. So I'm really excited to kind of touch on those a little bit and show you how you can be a little bit more accessible. So if you want to follow along, I'll put some links up in the chat. So here's our code of conduct, and here you go. And that's the module that so basically how it works is that in these workshops, we have these series called Microsoft Learn, where they have all this technical content. And what I do is just simplify it down to basically what you need to know, make it really easy to understand, and just kind of talk about it. And if you want to, you can turn on your cameras or your mics and we can just have a conversation. But we'll just go through it, make it super easy so that you basically don't have to learn all of that on your own time. And it really helps. So for example, if you're looking to, I don't know, be more aware, be a better ally, or be more employable, or just want to learn more about being more accessible and being more inclusive, just attending today is a great first step. So the agenda today's workshop will be a little bit shorter. Usually these are an hour, but I've kind of made it about 40 minutes this time, just so maybe if you wanted some time back, and we don't need to go over like a lot of all the details, just pretty much what you need to know. So we'll chat a little bit about why disability and accessibility is important. After that, we'll go through the MSLearn module together, which should take us about 30 minutes. And hopefully by the end of it, we can get a completion badge. Is a URL? Yep, so Mal, I'll share the recordings in the chat right after. All right, great. So a little bit about me. My name's Eamon. I'm the Reactor Program Manager in Toronto. So a few of you might have been joining from like our meetup pages. Maybe that's in London or San Francisco, Redmond. There's a bunch of locations that we have globally. Just put it in the chat where you're coming from. I'd love to know where. But I'm from Toronto, so it's about 12 p.m. here. So it's like lunchtime. Great time to kind of have a nice chat. Outside of being a Reactor PM, I created an inclusive children's literature and programming B Corp business, which is really exciting. Probably takes up most of my time these days, about creating, stories of women in STEM. So I'm really passionate about diversity and inclusion, especially for young children, especially for women. So this is really great for me to be able to talk about diversity with folks with Microsoft as well. All right, we can skip that one as well. So why this is really important, especially nowadays, to really be more aware about being accessible in your day-to-day life, is that there's currently 1.5 billion people in the world with disabilities. 80% of them live in developing or developed countries. And then, especially in Canada, for example, if that's where I'm from, you might not be from Canada, but maybe you can check out what the stats are in your own countries. But in Canada, 1 in 7 people, which is about 4.5 million people, currently have a disability. And in about 9 years, that's going to grow to 1 in 5 people. So if you're in a room with 5 people, at least one person will have some sort of learning disability, visual disability, any kind of disability under the umbrella. So it's really important for all of us to be really aware of that, and really take the steps to kind of learn how to be better allies. And you never know, it could even either that's yourself or someone around you. It's just really important to be aware. So, but one thing to note is that people with accessibility issues or disabilities define those terms in many different ways. So something that we think is accessible isn't, or, saying things like, oh, a disabled person or a person with disability, people will use that term in different manners. So there's really no umbrella term that's like, oh, this is disability, because people with disabilities will describe it in their own ways. So that's just something to keep in mind as you talk about accessibility and disability. All right, great. So going right from that, the most common definition of accessibility, which is kind of just used generally throughout the world, is that accessibility means creating experiences for people of all abilities. So it's the concept where a product or a service can be used by everyone and have an equal user experience, however they use it. So that's really important to note. Another important takeaway to keep in mind is that accessible designs, especially when it comes to technology, they help everyone. So it's not only, the right thing to do, but it also brings benefit to all users. So for example, accessibility features that help people with disabilities often just help other people as well. So like video captions will help people who have hearing difficulties, but they'll also help a person who is maybe watching it on mute or is watching a video in like a really loud environment. So similar to this, if you're, we're going to talk a little bit later about Word documents and PowerPoint. And yeah, if you make your PowerPoint presentation really accessible, it's great for folks who have disability concerns. But it's also great for people who just need maybe they're with their children or something, and it just helps them understand. Or you can see like reading order, for example. We'll chat about that in a bit. It'll help them understand the flow of the presentation in advance and so on. So those things, just being accessible, helps everybody at the end of the day. So it really is kind of a win-win for everyone. Another example would be maybe using legible or high contrast text on your presentations or on your documents. They'll help people with vision difficulties as well, but they'll also help people who have perfect eyesight, but they're using the app or the presentation outdoors. So if you're presenting something and your manager's on the call, and you aren't using legible text and they're outside, then it's just a horrible user experience for anybody. So it's just really important to keep note. And there's many different types of accessibility issues, some that are social, political, class-based, but some of the most common ones are on the slide right now, which would be like visual, hearing, cognitive difficulties, speech difficulties, mobility, neural. So there's a whole bunch of them. Yeah, so in this workshop that we're going to start in like 2 seconds, there's a few terms that might not be common to everyone. So I thought we could just go over them really quickly. So when I say alt text, it basically just means alternative text. It's the invisible description of images which are read aloud on a screen reader. So adding alt text allows authors or users to to include these images, but still provide that content in a text-based format. So if you add an image and someone who's using a screen reader can't really understand or see it or recognize it, they can read the descriptive text that's built into the image. And that way they can kind of engage with your presentation or something the same way. On the other hand, folks without vision difficulties, if the image is like hard to understand or they can't really comprehend it, that alt text will help them as well. So that's just a really best practice for when you're adding images to anything. A screen reader is a software that helps people with sight loss or vision difficulties to use computers. And basically what it does is that it reads out text on screen in a computerized voice. So it just kind of reads out what's happening. They can be very detailed. Some of them will read out everything. Well, they'll say, heading on the left side, image on the right, text heading here, and then blah, blah, it'll just go through everything. But some of them will just kind of read out the important stuff and just scan like the main content of a topic. But that's stuff that the person using the screen reader can customize. So most people will just generally use their computer with like a standard keyboard, but maybe if you have vision loss completely, you can also use these specialized like Braille keyboards to read what's on a computer. And then the other thing, we'll chat about this when we're on the PowerPoint and Word topics, but sans serif fonts. Sans just means no in French, and serif is a type of font. So what those are is that sans serif fonts basically are typefaces or fonts that display better on computers and mobile devices. So when you're, even sending emails, if you use sans serif fonts, those are more accessible. And what serif is basically these like little lines at the end of different characters. So you might have noticed like when you write an A, it might have a little line at the end or something. It just removes all of that, so it's just the basic shape. So this text on the screen right now, you'll see that it has no extra lines. Like on a capital T, it might have little lines on the end. It just has all that removed. So it's a very accessible font for all types of screens. Those can be kind of very difficult for people with visual impairments or reading disability. So it's really good just to kind of avoid those really decorative or stylized fonts. Just keep it simple. Some popular ones, I'm sure you already know these, but like Arial or Times New Roman. Times New Roman is an example of a serif font because it has a lot of, like little lines and stuff. That's actually not as accessible. But Arial, Helvetica, those are really good ones that you can use. All right, so going on to some of the Windows 10 accessibility features, the biggest one is something called Accessibility Checker. So to make sure that people of all abilities can read and edit a document or spreadsheet or presentation, you should run Accessibility Checker. That's in Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, all 4 of them have it. What it does is it locates elements that may create an accessibility issue and then gives you recommendations on how to fix it. It's really simple, straightforward. It's just designed to kind of streamline the process of creating quality content that's accessible to everyone. And what it does is it uses AI to kind of make suggestions for improvements. So what you can do is, like, for example, in that middle picture there, you'll notice it says, keep accessibility checker running while I work. You just tick that box and I'll show you how to get to that. Once you tick that box, it just runs in the background and gives like these really subtle reminders in the status bar. You can even close the status bar and check it all at the end. But it'll show you if there's any issues or concerns with your document. It might say something like, no accessibility issues found, everything's great, or it might give you suggestions like, oh, your alt text is missing, or this heading is not legible, or I can't really read these colors, or like give, use better contrast or something. So that's kind of a really good way to just let the computer do the work for you. When you do run the accessibility checker, usually there's a pane on the right side, which will give you 3 types of results. So in that image, you can see it gives you either errors, warnings, or tips. So errors are content that just can't be read at all with people who are using screen readers. So errors, definitely try and fix them. Warnings are just like something that says that content that might be difficult for people to read. So it's just a little bit of a warning. Maybe this might be understood and be used by folks, but it might not be. So it's just something to keep in mind. And tips are issues that are less critical, but they could be improved for a greater accessibility. So you can use these errors, warnings, and tips to update your content and make it more accessible. For example, in a Word document, if the image doesn't have alt text, it'll tell you to add alt text, or it can even give you a suggestion of like a sample text based on like computer vision. So what it does, it'll scan the image and see if there's trees or something in it. It'll say image of 3 trees, and it'll just give you that suggestion. Maybe you could edit that. So super powerful tool and very easy to use, but it's in almost all of these. Like we'll talk about Word, PowerPoint, it's almost in all of them. So it's really good to turn it on. The next one is Word. So we'll go through some examples of Word. So I've made documents of everything, and we'll just kind of go through actual samples of it instead of just talking about it. But yeah, it's just something to be aware of when making accessible documents. I'm personally not sure if they also apply to Google Docs or not, but I'm sure it can't hurt for you to do the same things there. So one thing would be headings. So here, I just have this Reactor Toronto Word document. We can look through it together. But headings are really important because they not only do help the text stand out and help people understand how your document's organized, but they also provide a navigation structure. So when you're using a screen reader, or for folks that are using it, they can actually just skip through the headings. So the screen reader will organize all the main headings and jump to different topic points. So when people are reading your presentation or document, they'll just use the arrow keys to kind of go from heading 1, heading 2, and like read what is relevant to them. So they provide a structure to the document. You can just use the built-in heading style. So this, for example, I use title style. You could use this heading style. If you type your own of something that's not a heading, so for example, you could just create a style that's your own. So if you just, for example, if I just type something here, like heading, and make it bold and big, that's not accessible as a heading because it's not listed as a heading style. So that's something to keep in mind. So that, like, this, for example, is a heading or a title slide. It would just be a normal text. So a screen reader would just skip through it. It wouldn't even count it as a heading style. So that's something to keep in mind. And then it's really important to also keep in mind what heading style you use. So for example, if this one was heading 1 and introduction, I want that to be like a subheading, I'll use that as heading 2 so that when the screen reader is scrolling through it, it knows that the introduction is part of the top playbook part. So it's all nested and together, and it's like the structures formatted well. For other folks, so folks who aren't using screen readers, this is still really helpful because then they can, if there's a heading style, they can minimize or maximize those areas. They can just close the things that they don't need to see. So this introduction, if my manager is reading this, she probably doesn't really care about reading again about what reactors are because she already knows about it. So she'll just close it, right? So that's just one way to be helpful and accessible to people. Another thing, so images. I'm sure we all add images to everything, and they're a great way to add like visual interest and graphics, but there's a way to make them accessible as well. So overarching, when there's images in a document, there's usually 3 types of images. They're either decorative, or they're just simple, or they're complex. So decorative are just things like maybe like a nice arrow going through, pointing at something, or some like curvy lines around something. Images that don't really add any value, like this is just a sign of Mars, which is where the Toronto reactor is located. That's what the building is called, and that's what the building looks like. So it really adds no real value. So this is considered a decorative image. So what I would do is anything that's not decorative needs to be communicated to these screen readers. So people who are low vision or blind can understand what's in the image. So what you can do is if we go in review and then check accessibility, so it pulls up this pane. I don't know, can everyone see this pane right here? Yep, so in this pane you'll notice that there's a bunch of errors that it says, and then warnings. So this image, it says image or object not in line, and there's missing alt text. So if I go in this first one, picture 3, this one has no alt text with it. I'll just go in and maybe add a description. So I could just say, oh, I have not been sharing my screen. Wait, can people not see this? Can people not see my Word screen? Tell me if you can't. Like Word document? Not the whole time? Let me know. Yes? No? No? Okay. Let me try this. What about now? Can you see it? Yes? Yes? Okay. Well, I'm so sorry. I'll just quickly show you, but basically this was the heading style home here. This is what the heading styles look like. You can change it and update and edit your headings here. I have this one right here. When I was talking about the arrow, that's really helpful to close it with. So when you make something a heading, you can collapse and expand them, which is really helpful for anybody. And you should try to nest them. So heading 1 would be, like the main heading. Heading 2 would be like a subheading, and you can arrange it like that. This image right here, this is how I went to the accessibility checker, where basically you'll go in review, check accessibility, and it'll give you a bunch of these errors or warnings. So for this image, for example, it says that there's 25 images in this document where I haven't added alternative text. If I go on image picture 4, this is, for example, a map of where Mars is located. I would just go here, add description, and I'll just add map of Mars location with address and hours of operation, or something like that. Or I can ask it to generate a description for me where it just says diagram. So this description is obviously not very descriptive, which is why, you know, sometimes you just have to do it manually. Like a computer might not be able to judge it perfectly all the time. Or if this is a completely irrelevant image where I don't care if a screen reader reads it or not, I could just mark it as decorative. And then what it says is that content is marked as decorative and will not expose a description to the screen reader. So that's done. I can go back to my accessibility pane and see what else is there. So I have all this alt text that's missing that I have to go through. And then we can see like it has image or object not in line. So if this is kind of just floating in the middle of nowhere, it'll ask me to just place it in line or mark it as decorative. So I would personally mark this as decorative because I don't think the screen reader needs to see this because it's so irrelevant. I would just mark it as decorative and that's gone as well. So that's one thing gone. Great. Now, second thing I want to mention is links. So when you add links to your documents, it's probably best if you use kind of a meaningful link display text. So what this means is that people who are using screen readers will just have it easier to understand those links. So something to keep in mind is to avoid non-specific display text like click here or learn more, because that really doesn't make sense of where this link is going. So how screen readers work with links is that they'll compile all the links in a document, and then you'll have to go through and click, like the screen reader will just open each one, but they wouldn't know which link corresponds to where in the document. So for example, if I have a link here, all the other links throughout the whole document are all kind of like categorized together or organized together in one area for the screen reader. But then when the person's going through the screen reader, they wouldn't even know what Visit Mars correlates to in the document. If that makes sense. So for example, over here, instead of saying click when I'm talking about, you know, the Toronto reactor is located at 101 College Street, blah, 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 and put their address. I could just, if I put in something like saying, click here to learn more or find out more, it doesn't really make you understand what is this link about. But if I had put Visit Mars, or if I just right click, edit link, maybe change it to Visit Mars on this address, it might link to, you know, their Google Maps or something. So yeah, keeping your links accessible and the link text accessible is really helpful. Yeah, because if every link is very generic text, it's really not useful for the user, but it also makes things a little better. I remember I took this one course a while back where I had this UX course that I took, and they told me that the best customer experience is to make link text accessible. Instead of saying click here to learn more, people are less likely to click on it. But if you say something like find out more about this here or something, people are more likely to click it. And this was more so for sales related things, like making people curious to click on something, but it applies here as well. Okay, great. So the last one I want to talk about with Word are lists. Here, I'll just open my Word document again. Lists and bullets and numbered lists, they provide a structure as well, like we talked about headings. And people with screen readers can navigate a document a lot easier if there's bulleted lists versus you just pressing enter each time. They can, you know, use keyboard shortcuts to use them. If you don't put them as lists, each list item will just read as like a text item. And then they don't really understand that what is together and what's part of the list versus what's part of, like, I don't know, a paragraph above or below it. This also applies for emails. If you have long emails with all your action items kind of written out in the text body, like in a part of a paragraph, it's really not accessible for the person to be like, you know, skim through the whole document altogether versus just like read the list points together. So bullets, lists, great, use them. They're really helpful for folks. All right, sweet. So I think that's pretty much it that I want to chat about for Word, but you'll notice that there's a lot more out there about keeping your document more accessible, where it has stuff like what you can change, what you can fix. Another one here that I got was merged or split cells in tables. So if I go down to my table, like this one, it's not very legible because I merged the whole text body together. It's saying that that's not great. So you could either split the cells or just ignore it. So if I split cells, it doesn't look as nice to myself. So I would just click ignore or like fix it or change it. There, so that's that. One thing I also want to mention really quickly about Word that is really helpful, and I've started using this as well, is Resume Assistant. And not a lot of people use this, but Word is great for accessible resumes, especially when when you're applying to jobs online and they have these automatic ATS checkers where they'll just go through like this automatic software will just kind of go through your resume and find keywords relating to the job description and so forth. So if you go here on Resume Assistant, you can connect your LinkedIn account, upload your resume, upload maybe like the job description you're applying to and stuff, and it'll find out like all those things and help you, craft something that is really accessible for those resume checkers. Like if you have random columns or images in your resume, it tells you what is accessible to the computer and what isn't. So that's really helpful too. All right, great. Okay, so we're back to the slides. Hopefully everyone can see them. The next one would be PowerPoint. So for this, I'll actually open the PowerPoint I'm presenting now and show this to you. PowerPoint presentations, tend to be very visual, and people who are blind or have low vision can understand more easily if you create slides with accessibility in mind. And there's a ton of built-in resources that you can use here. So let me know if you can see. Can you see my PowerPoint in its like edit mode right now? You can just let me know. Yes? Yes? No? Okay. Well, hopefully everyone can see it. So yeah, here's my PowerPoint presentation that I was using to present to you guys at this moment in time, and I have my notes here and so on. But one of the main things some of the main things are colors, reading order, slide titles, and layout and design. So what this means is that for colors and styles, for example, you need good contrast, and good contrast basically means what is visual. So like dark text on light background or light text on dark background is basically what good contrast means. It allows people with low vision to view content on a slide. If there's designs with text over the images or transparent backgrounds, people with low vision might not see it properly, or it might not even look as pretty, to be honest. So when using color to express something on a slide, you should always provide some sort of contrast to view it the same way. So for example, if you maybe have a project update or something like that, like, oh, what's the status of a project? It's green, yellow, red, and you have a whole table with like green, yellow, red. Of green, this project is doing well. Yellow, this maybe isn't. Red, not doing well. And you put it with those circles, like a traffic light almost. It might be best if you also add a symbol inside them. So if there's a green circle, maybe add a green check mark or a red X. So that way the colors, people who are maybe colorblind, they're not disbarred from seeing your content and engaging with it properly. So that's really helpful. I'll show you in the next slide right here. So this is actually Microsoft's own internal accessibility slide that we use for just employees when they're giving PowerPoint presentations to be more accessible. It says, for example, take the following steps to create accessible content that everyone can consume effectively. Here's an example of contrast. So use high contrast colors. This is kind of complex, but basically it just means 4.5 to 1. It's like a color thing that if something's black, you probably shouldn't have like a gray background on it. You want something like a white. So black on white, or white on blue, dark blue, but white on light blue wouldn't work. So this is pretty complex, but just understand that it's best to be as contrasting as possible. So if you're doing yellow on purple, it's not really going to show that well. But if you're doing white on purple, it will show because the contrast is bigger. There's contrast analyzers online too if you really care about that deep stuff. But this is really a good rule of thumb is to just use black on white or white on black. And then when we're talking about shape and color, like we just talked about in the last slide. So for example, if you have green, blue, red, maybe you can add a legend so people know what it is. or just red X is fairly universal. That just means, stop or bad or something's not going well. So icons are better than just, only if there was a green circle, yellow circle, red circle, you wouldn't know what that means if you're maybe colorblind or you have low vision. Alt text we talked about a little bit earlier. You can click on an item, you can edit alt text, edit a description. Same thing applies in PowerPoint as well. In PowerPoint, you're more likely to add more stylistic things, like you'll add random cute shapes or lines and whatever, or like smart art graphics. So the graphics that we add from here, all of these, they're not very accessible, so you will just want to make sure that you check the accessibility checker and it'll tell you if something is accessible or not. And now we'll talk about layouts. So slide layout and reading order basically just means how someone goes through a document. So where are they starting, where are they finishing? So what that really means is when people who are using screen readers or arrow keys, they can use their arrow keys or shortcuts to read through the text on the slide, and they read through the content in the order that I want it to be or you want it to be. So the author sets the content order, and that's what helps you read it. So the visual order and the reading order. Most of the time, universally, people read from, especially English, they'll read from left to right. But in Arabic, for example, it's right to left. But yeah, so reading order, how it goes. And so you'll notice, so for example, in this slide right before it, the reading order is that I want people to read this title first. I want them to read these bullet points next. And this image on the right is very decorative, but I still want people to just, see it after they see the actual text. So what you can do is set this reading order. So in PowerPoint, there's two ways to set the reading order. There's the accessibility checker that has a reading order pane, and there's a selection pane. So if we go in the accessibility, you'll notice it has some errors, it has some slide titles missing, it has some, intelligence services, basically like a suggestion, what is really good to do. So it'll suggest alternative text for you. But what you can also do is select the reading order pane. And on this page, it says title should be read first and the text should come second. So you can do that. If I was to rearrange it, someone using a screen reader would read this text first and the PowerPoint second, even though it's laid out like this. So if I want people to see that first, you can do that. And then there's another place, which is a selection pane, where you can check that out. Basically, to do that, you would just go into Home, Arrange, and Selection pane. Selection pane is actually read in reverse. So objects on the bottom of the selection pane are read first. So I would put this text title probably lower. And title 1 isn't really that great of a title, so I would just say PowerPoint. And maybe I'll just change this bullet points list to bullets about the accessibility, or I could just leave it as it is because yeah, here I could hide it, whatever you want to do. So this way, if a screen reader is going through the content, it'll know what to read first, what's the reading order, where should people go first, what should be read by them or what shouldn't be read by them. Like for example, this slide is pretty irrelevant as well because it just has like 4 things on it, and I'm kind of talking about most things. So this word PowerPoint is really irrelevant for a screen reader to read. So I would just kind of hide that if it's irrelevant. It'll stay on the slide, but it won't be read. So that's really helpful. Slide titles, that's a really helpful thing as well. So in the accessibility checker, you might have noticed that it says there's missing slide titles. So for example, all these slides, like this PowerPoint slide, it has a title. The Word slide has a title and so on, but it says slide 4, which is this one, it has no title. So, and this is just like an outline view, but it has no title. So what I can do is either set as a slide title, there. So I've set this word as the slide title. If I go on slide 16, I can set this one as a slide title. There. You can add one, you can add a hidden one, but I can just set whatever it is as a slide title. Great, so that's accessible. When the screen reader is reading it, it'll know to go to knowledge check, title, and then give the link after. So that's really helpful. And then layout and design. I mean, we chatted a little bit about the layout and design. Here, let me go back to outline normal view. chat a little bit about layout and design, but I wanted to go back to this slide a little bit because it's a really good example of contrast, shape and color, alt text, and so forth. So it's just as a rule of thumb, it's great if you just keep things simple. If you use really complicated slide layouts, they have kind of a difficulty understanding them. There's really no rule of thumb for it. It's kind of just iffy. You don't know if it'll come up or not come up in a screen reader, which is confusing for folks. So anything that's simple and easy to follow, that's great. Smart art, like we chatted about earlier here. If you use something like, I don't know, something really complex like this type of stuff, it can be really hard for anyone to follow. Like, wait, oh, so are we reading this one first, this one second, this one third? So kind of complex. It's best to just keep it straightforward and have good contrast and use a sans serif font. This is another slide where they have a good example of color contrast of how things show up on certain things. So just really good to pick the colors carefully and never only rely on color to relay information. You know, you can have graphics and other things in there, mark them as decorative so people know that that's not really something that needs to be read out. And then, yeah, that should be great. It's kind of PowerPoint in a nutshell. There's a bunch of them. Like I have this alt text missing on this, just a random, here, I'll just add a description. So this is trophy earned on MSLearn. There, so that's that. Let's see, what else? Oh, that's just a picture of myself in the book, so we can ignore that. I'll edit that later. Oh, but yeah, see if it suggested a automated generation. So picture containing text, stationery, and lip box. So this is obviously not very accurate. So you should probably just enter that yourself. Okay, great. Okay, move on to Excel. Okay. Here, let me know. I'm just gonna pull up my Excel document really quickly. But yeah, Excel, has everyone used Excel? I feel like a lot of people have used Excel at least once in their life for something. I know I try to stay away from Excel because it's not very fun to use, and I don't like numbers and graphs and things like that. But you know, there's still ways to make your Excel documents very accessible with headers, sheet names, charts, and table names. So if we pull this up, can everyone see my Excel document there? Just let me know if you can't. You can just type it in the chat. Yes? Okay, great. Yeah, I don't want to have another situation where I'm talking and people just can't see what's on the screen. But yeah, so I made this generic Excel document, you know, a quick table with some numbers and random chart for it. So very straightforward. But there's a couple of things that you can do to make it more accessible. So column headers are really important. Those help you with navigating through a table with a lot of data. Most screen readers will actually read out column headers when they're in a cell within a table. So for example, if the screen reader is here, it won't, you know, it doesn't go in the same reading order as PowerPoint. Even if you're here, it'll say minimum column B line 5 is 10 or something. So it'll read out the column header as it's reading out the cell. So it won't just say 10, it'll say minimum 10 or something. So that's really helpful. When you're making a table, you can just kind of highlight whatever numbers you have. You can insert it as a table. You'll notice this one says my table has headers. Yep, so make sure that's checked because that if you do have headers, make sure the names are descriptive. So it's not just column 1, column 2. Put it as, you know, max number of pets or max number of whatever it is your content is about, and it'll make that table for you. Once the table is done, you can, you know, choose whatever style you like, but again, you want to make sure that it's accessible. So this, for example, is not very accessible. Like white on light gray text, it's not going to stand out or jump out for people. So even visually, it doesn't look as nice. So that's just one way of that you can be, you know, accessible in terms of color, but it also doesn't look as nice. So maybe we'll do that because that stands out a bit more. And you can do that. Next one would be sheet names. So at the bottom, this part right here, when you just say sheet 1 or 2, the screen readers, it's just really hard for people to navigate when they're using their screen readers and just kind of going through their keyboards. So always rename them to whatever it is. So I'll just say chart summary or something. This is just a best practice. I think anyone, like, this is not even about accessibility, just name your stuff all the time. It's really helpful. And then obviously for people who are using them, it's more accessible. When you're making charts, for example, so charts are kind of where it's always more iffy, where it's like a photo, but people can't really, like, when you add alt text to a photo, you'd probably just say a chart about the data. But again, it's not really descriptive of what's happening, but screen readers can actually read charts in Excel pretty well in terms of like the access or the titles that you have there, the legend. It can actually make, like, read those out to folks. Oh, sorry, let me go back to Excel really quickly. So what you can do is that if you go, you should always add chart labels. If I go on chart design, add element, and I add a vertical label. Oh, I just took it out, my bad. There. I can add a title here. So this could be number of pets. I don't know. This one could be quantity. I don't know if they're both the same thing, but just using it as an example. But yeah, so chart titles really help. So those are their axis titles, like x-axis and y-axis, what they should be. You should add data labels. So those things like, if you have none, means that there's no data label. Legends, so that's like too much, I think. Max and min, you can just play around with it however you want. But yeah, data label is really important to read as well. So because if you just have these lines going through, like the blue line and the orange line, the screen reader might not read out like, oh, the line curves up, curves down, goes up. So if you have these data points, it'll say 4, 17, 15, 18, and read out exactly where it is. So you can add those data labels. That's really helpful. Another example of accessible chart design are colors. We chatted about colors earlier, but yeah, just have good contrast between the labels and the data points. Patterns read really well as well. So if you use solid colors, they're not as legible as patterns on screen readers. But personally, I think patterns, just for myself, when I'm making documents, patterns are a little bit harder for me to read. So that's just like, you know, you have to make the call sometimes as well, what's legible. Personally, I like solid colors, but for most screen readers, patterns are better, you know, when you have your bar charts or whatever. Always add alt text as well. So the same thing applies here, where if you go in review, you can check accessibility. This would be running in the background. You can add this chart summary here. So you could add a description to say chart about, min and max of pet owners. Okay, my English is so bad there, but there you go. So that's your accessibility done. Anything else? No accessibility issues found. People with difficulties should have no difficulty reading this book. So we've done, you know, the name here, we've done the titles, we've done all of this. So great, no issues there. The font size, let me just double check. 12 and higher is always best. Anything smaller just doesn't read as well. Table names, you have everything there. So I think that's great for Excel. We'll move on to Outlook. So if we go to Outlook, there. So obviously I can't show everybody my Outlook email with like internal Microsoft stuff, but I have this just one email window open. But Outlook is basically, not everyone uses Outlook. Some people use Gmail or Hotmail or Windows Live Mail or something, or even Yahoo Mail. I know my dad still uses Yahoo Mail, which is so old now, but he still uses it. But a lot of people do use Outlook. Outlook is, you know, great for connecting information, getting organized, getting things done. Like there's tasks and to-do lists and all this other stuff in there. But again, I didn't know about this before, but you can also have accessible emails, how you're sending them out. Here, I'll show you an example of one. Can everyone see this random email that I pull up? Let me know if you can't see it. But for example, I have this generic email with some text like hello, blah, 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 lists and so on. And I'm typing out my email. But what you can do is sometimes for screen readers, they read them in HTML formatting. And what that is, HTML formatting is like the most basic type of formatting. So even in Word, for example, where you have heading, it'll know where a heading is, bold text or italics and so on. HTML can do that. So if I was to go in here, format text and I put it as HTML, this is legible by a screen reader. If I do plain text, it makes it like all formatting gone. It's just the most basic text only. A lot of sometimes, and I don't know if you've noticed, but sometimes when you send people emails, they'll reply back in this type of format where your email has all its kind of, fun things that you've added to it removed. That might be because they're using a screen reader or they're using like a HTML or plain text format so that all that extra is removed and it's just straightforward only text. Or it might do rich text, which I don't actually know what that is, but plain text and HTML are the two most common ones here. We'll just go back to it. Okay, I don't know how to go back to it. But anyways, once you go back, I guess you can't go back to HTML. But anyways, so when you have that, it kind of just removes all the formatting, makes it super accessible. You can also add tables in Outlook. They're usually really common strategy to kind of organize content in an email, but unfortunately, like tables in other applications like PowerPoint or Excel, they're not as accessible in Outlook and they're very challenging. So when you do put tables in Outlook emails, the order of the content is really, really important. So just check the reading order. And people will always, like screen readers will read it in the reading order way. If you have empty cells or columns and rows, it's really hard to navigate with screen readers. So it's just best not to have any empty cells in a table. If there's empty cells, just don't put a table. So yeah, if you just have a table for like decoration or design, don't put headers because then it'll just jump the navigation will just like jump to a header even though there's no content in there. So I would just say tables in Outlook are usually just not as accessible and they're not as easy to navigate. It's best to just kind of avoid it. Do lists if you can. Yeah, or if you are putting it in, just make it very simple. Don't make it too decorative or fancy with like colors and different headers and all this stuff. Make it super simple. Fonts, we chatted about fonts earlier. Make sure your fonts are accessible. Here, let me go back to that email really quickly. You can change your fonts here. Pretty straightforward, like anything like this. It's just not great. That's not even is it pretty. Even though this might seem like it's pretty legible, it's way too much. There's way too many things that make it serif fonts. Like there's way too many like little lines and things that aren't as legible by screen readers. You can change your font for all over Outlook to just always be a certain font. And that way, just make sure you choose a sans serif font, and then any email you send will be sent in that font. Images have the same kind of requirement as PowerPoint or Word or Excel, where you just add alt text and it can do that for you. Same thing, you can check accessibility and it should do that. Lastly, I know we only have like 10 minutes left in the call now, but I just wanted to chat a little bit about disability and inclusion. For some of you that have joined this earlier, I chatted about it last week as well, but all our bodies will change over time, but we all deserve access at every stage in our lives. So everyone who's, working alongside you won't always have the same concerns or the same viewpoint on how they live their life as you. Most people will need accessibility solutions at some point, whether that's for a family member, a colleague, or for yourself. So it's really important to remember that disability is part of the human experience. Everyone will have that experience at some point, but inclusion is a choice. So when you're trying to be inclusive in how you create content into the world or just use it yourself, that's like an action verb. That's like a conscious decision that you're making to be inclusive. So that's just something to keep in mind. They are very interconnected, like diversity and inclusion. They're very interconnected, but they're not interchangeable. So diversity would just be like a representation of a group or like a representation of an entity. Like for example, I would be, a brown woman. That's like a diverse umbrella that I would fall under. But inclusion would be a little bit more than that. It's about the contributions, the presence, the perspectives, and so forth. So it's a lot of different and very complex things that can fall under inclusion, but just something to remember is that you making a choice to be inclusive is like an action, so something you do. Okay. And there's a really famous quote that's really popular and it's everywhere on the internet as well. And it's by this leader in the D&I industry who her name is Verna Myers. And she said, diversity is being asked to the party while inclusion is being asked to dance. So even though you're creating content and making all these slides or like documents or emails, like that's something so everyday and so mundane, but you being inclusive in that is you just taking that, asking somebody to dance, you're taking that step. So it's just really important to know that. And yeah, I'm going forward to the MSLearn certification. So why this whole topic basically is content that I took from the MSLearn module. MSLearn is Microsoft Learn. It's this online training platform that they've created. It's like a big hub of interactive learning modules for like Microsoft products and even external technology. And there's like these fun, guided, interactive content out there that's specific to your role and goals. So it's like role-based training and learning paths for specific jobs. So if you're maybe like a software developer or project manager, you can go in, project manager role-based content. And if you go in project manager, it's like this big area where that has all these specific courses that you can take, or like show what are those called, like modules you can learn from, and those are just really helpful for your specific role. So maybe you don't really need to learn a lot about data visualization as a project manager, but maybe learning about accessibility fundamentals is really important. So there's specific learning paths for different technologies, and you can learn everything about that one technology in there. So there's this, so all the content from today, I pretty much took all of that plus a little bit more from here and there from just my own research on the accessibility fundamentals learning path, which included 4 modules. The first 2 we did the previous 2 weeks. Today's was the third one on the list, which says creating accessible content. Next week we'll do digital accessibility. And then what we do is basically every time you complete a module, you get certain experience points, like XP points. So today's, if you were to take the end quiz together after doing this module together, you'll get these points, and at the end you can get these badges after you complete the module, like the entire learning path. After you do that, you'd get that trophy, which is like an accessibility fundamentals trophy. You can share it on LinkedIn. You can show folks that I'm doing all this diversity and inclusion work, and I'm putting in the effort, and it's just great for people to know that you're doing that work. And it's even for yourself, maybe for future jobs or employers, that you're proactive about that. And there's other tools, other like learning paths out there that are maybe about Power BI or Excel or Azure, which actually have exams for it. Today's, like the accessibility one doesn't have an exam, but at the end you can take an exam, which gives you like an actual certificate, which you can use for, I don't know, if people say, for example, if you're applying for a job that requires someone to be certified in Excel, you can show that as proof that, yes, I've completed this educational tool and I'm certified by Microsoft in Excel. So Microsoft Learn is a really good hub to go. I've put a link up in the chat already for today's module, but we can try it together. So we can try going through that module and see our knowledge. So here's the end of the knowledge check, and you can see that there's all these topics. I just summarized them all into this quick presentation, but you're welcome to go ahead and go through those to see anything else that you want to learn more about. But at the end, there's a knowledge check, and it's really quick. We can just find out if whatever we learned, and you can all do it together right now. But yeah, so recommended character limit for alt text for images is 150. So anything more than 150 characters is just too long. It might not even fit in the box for alt text, and usually like universally around the globe, whatever there's alt text box, more than 150 might not even fit there. Why is setting the reading order critical for someone using a screen reader? They can use arrow keys or shortcuts to read through the text in order. Yeah, they will have to navigate. So all of these don't really work well, but yeah, so it's so that they can use their arrow keys to kind of navigate through something, through their whole presentation. If you use a table for decorative or design purposes rather than organizing, how should you mark the header? Make sure the header row box is not checked. Accessibility checker is available in all of the above. If the diagram doesn't have alt text, it'll flag it as an error. Let's check. I don't know if I got everything right. Okay, great. So I got 200 XP points. I'll just continue without saving progress. I completed the module, said unlock the achievement. Great, I did it. I can share it on LinkedIn. Let's see what it looks like. Actually, I've never shared this before on LinkedIn, but I should. Okay, this is huge, but I would just share it in a post maybe. What do I do? I don't know. Okay, anyways, you could do that and it will just send the link out. But that's pretty much what the benefit of using Microsoft Learn accessibility tools is and why you joined me today. So I hope you learned something new. I'll put the recording up with some of these links, which is really helpful for later on if you want to learn more about diversity and inclusion. There's just so much out there. It can feel like you're just reading. So maybe this is a good place for you to start. There's a lot of content to cover, but maybe you can watch some documentaries. Like I have 5 documentaries to watch on the importance of accessibility by this great organization that's Canadian called Access Now, and a whole bunch of other content out there. And I'll update this list as we go through it. But yeah, that's kind of it for me. If you have any questions about D&I, thanks for the recordings. Please let me know. And yeah, we have like the next 3 minutes if you have any other questions for me. You can feel free to unmute yourself if you want to ask that way as well. Mel. Oh, thanks, Edwin. Yeah, so I'll put the recording for this one up. The previous one, I think we only have the first one up right now. The second, like the one from last week, is still going up now because I try to add the transcription with it. Because, you know, like for example, what are those called? Closed captioning. Not everyone can read closed captions later on after the event's over. So I try to upload the transcription, which might take a little bit of time. So last week's and this week's should be up by end of this week. So you can check those out now. And yeah, and next week we'll go over digital accessibility. Oh, up here. Good question. Here, let me put that in the chat. Go up on YouTube. So that's the YouTube channel where it'll all be. And then I'll also put it in the comments of the event you attended from today, so you can check it out. And yeah, and if you have any feedback, I'd love to hear it. Like I'll read it or my manager will read it and we'll find out if we can make these more accessible somehow or maybe cover more topics if you'd like me to go more in depth about certain things. Like this is fairly high level, but I think later on, maybe like 3 or 4 weeks from now, we'll go into like actual web development, like the specifics of HTML and stuff that can be more accessible. We'll go into the inclusive marketing. That's on Learn as well. So I'll go through the inclusive marketing module. And there's a bunch of other stuff. So you can check out the whole series. It's on Meetup. It's on our website as well. Here, I can just share the Toronto one, but you can check out some of the other ones. Here, they're always on Tuesdays, so this exact time once a week for like the next 4 or 5 weeks. And then after that, we have like other diversity and inclusion events that happen like at random as well, like programming for accessibility happen. I think there's a recording for that. I think that happened 2 weeks ago if you're interested in programming. But yeah, any other questions? Now we're like on time, but thank you so much for joining me and sticking around. Learning something new. Hopefully you learned something. But yeah, okay. There's no more questions. We can end it now. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll talk to you all hopefully next week. Thanks, Mel. Thanks, Pearl. Thanks, Raphael. Bye-bye.